Our next speaker is Kelle Steinecke, our Chief Motivational and Marketing Officer at Circle of Friends Club. She's also the host of her own podcast show, The Awesome Journey. It's a LinkedIn Live show that was created with the main goal to highlight incredible individuals to share their unique stories and challenges. Additionally, her aim is to showcase the incredible achievements of her guests who have pursued success in various fields. Welcome to the stage, Kelle.
Thank you so much. Yes, and the awesome journey is truly exactly what this is, because all of our lives are an awesome journey. Uh, we sometimes stay too focused on the destination and forget to live in the awesomeness of this thing called life. So thank you, Jason. It is such a privilege to be here with everyone, and I'm with you. Yesterday, I all the rest of the day, even after you and I were messaging, I was just like, man, I am so inspired. There was something special that happened, and incredible. So thank you, and thank you everyone for being here with me this morning. And I asked Jason earlier in the week, I'm like, man, do I need to put together a presentation? He's like, no, you just need to talk. And I was like, well, Lord knows I can do that. But I thought, I just really want to be inspired by what comes to me, because I always feel, and that's why I love the lives, is because I feel like messages sometimes when you're just present in it comes across so much better than we have something so pre-planned. We can have pre-planned like a topic that we want to talk about, but so what I've been inspired by since yesterday and just now, of course, is one of the first things that came to my mind is, we've all survived 100% of our bad days. That's a pretty darn good track record. And we tend to forget that. Um, and the other thing I was thinking about, maybe because it's Super Bowl weekend, is we all know that football fanatic, who's not only into NFL, but like totally into college ball and even local high school football. Um, and even the one that will watch the games, and when there's that one hit and two people fall to the ground and one gets up and one doesn't, and that they're like, oh gosh, how is this kid? And they find out later that this kid is in the hospital and has a severe spinal injury and will likely never walk again. They don't know this kid, but all they can think is, wow, what is this going to do to this family financially? And what can I do to help? And go and create a campaign in their community, raising funds. This is before GoFundMe, and raising funds and just showing up at the hospital to present a check. And when asked, why did you do this? And then the answer was, because I can. And that person was my father. And I share that because I think it's so important for all of us with mental health and what we do and being involved in our community. And what you just said was so beautiful, because we are all one, and how we move with each other. And those things, when we step up to help those who are in a bad position, and what that does for us, because it is my brother and I being kids and watching this, that impacted how we are in life. We're always involved in nonprofit and local community work, because that was part of our upbringing. Regardless of what we had or didn't have, you always have time to give back. And fast forwarding a little bit, my father, I have an older brother and myself, and we grew up very middle class. We didn't have a lot, but we had a lot of love in our four walls. And my dad raised me. He did teach me football. Saturdays football, watching our Fighting Irish. Don't be a hater. But and he wanted me to grow up to be an independent woman that could be whatever I wanted to be. Don't live in the boundaries of what the world tells you that you have to be as a female. And so I wanted to get into corporate America. Like, that was my goal. I'm going to be a businesswoman and I'm going to kick ass. And when I graduated high school, I was like, I'm not going to college. I'm going out in corporate America. And I went to an agency, did some interviews, and I landed a job at an international German car parts manufacturer as an assistant credit manager as a freaking teenager. And I look back and I'm like, I cannot believe the kahunas I had. But I had no fear, because we're not really jaded yet by things. It was just like, I'm fearless, I'm flying, I can do anything because my dad told me I could. And he was a little upset because he had to work 3 jobs to get through college. He grew up very poor and had a very awful childhood, and was like, "You kids, I can afford to pay for you to go to college, and I want you to have the opportunity." And I was like, "I'll take night classes, but I'm not going full time. Like, I'm loving this jam." And I moved into a condo with some other girlfriends, had to show a spreadsheet to my family to say, like, I can afford it. Here's how I can save. Here's all the bills I have. And I talked to my dad every day, telling him about work and what I was doing and all the cool stuff. And he said, "Hey, how about this weekend? We go on a trip to Palm Springs because I'm proud of what you're doing. I was committed, I was doing work, and I was succeeding at it. I was taking my coursework and I was paying my bills." And I was like, "That sounds awesome. I want to go to Palm Springs." That was kind of what we did as a family growing up, is we would go spend the weekends in Palm Springs at a pool and hiking and tennis and all the things. And so, as every teenager who lives on their own the first time, I pack my clothes into my hamper, ready to go the next day. And unfortunately, that evening, I was awoken at 3 a.m. by my brother crouching next to my bed. And I woke up and I remember seeing him and being like, "What is he doing here?" And in your mind, like, this isn't good. Because my brother, he was a full-time college student, but he was very responsible. So it wasn't like he had been out partying and needed a place to crash. That wasn't him at all. And he was like, "Kel, wake up." And I knew something was terrible. And I was like, I got to go to the bathroom. And went to the bathroom. And I didn't have to go to the bathroom, but it was like I was avoiding what was coming because I knew it was bad. And I went back and sat down, and he said, "Dad was on his way home from the airport, and there was an accident, and Dad was killed." And it still makes me a little emotional, obviously, because I think of my brother up until about 10 years ago, carried such guilt of being the deliverer of the message, because he goes, "I was walking up the stairs to your bedroom knowing I was going to break your heart." And watching it, how it hurt him, and he carried that for so long. And of course I was like, "I wouldn't have wanted anybody else but you." And in that moment, the world, it's that thing that, where space and time go sideways. And I could see his mouth continue to move, but I didn't hear the words. And I was screaming, but I couldn't hear myself. And we get in the car to drive home, and one of the neighbors had brought my brother and drove us back. And it was about a 25-minute drive, and it was the longest 25 minutes of my life. And I walked into the house, and there was, of course, not just my mom, but some other people were there. And it was just like, this isn't real. This can't be real. And I'm hearing things being said about, "Oh, we need to call Dr. Fine, who was our family dentist, because we need dental records." And my dad was John Doe for, I don't remember if it was a day, 2 days, 3 days, but it was a period of time. They knew it was his car, and obviously, but they needed to identify the body. And of course, I'm like, "Well, why? Like, why? What happened?" And it ended up being that there was, if anybody knows LA, where the 405 meets the 5, it's a huge interchange. It was literally 5 minutes from our house. And a woman who was on PCP and cocaine caused the chain reaction car accident. And someone rear-ended her. My dad rear-ended the guy. The woman behind my dad didn't hit her brake. She was looking down at her radio, hit my dad's car, and come to find out later, his car was also faulty, and his car exploded on impact. And the devastation of losing who was the cornerstone, my last name actually does mean cornerstone, of our family, was enough by itself. But now you're telling me his car exploded? And in my mind, there's no worse way to die than fire. Like, that's all I could think. And I was so devastated, angry, I mean, all the things. And I was pissed at God, because I thought, there is no God that would ever do this to somebody. ever, because this is so cruel. And I spent a period of time being very angry, but all the things, because mourning is all the things, and I'm being overwhelmed in all of them and not knowing where to start. And I have really a very little recollection of the first year after his death, because there was multiple court cases. The car manufacturer was a luxury car manufacturer, um, and it was 5 years. The woman that was on PCP and cocaine, that happened within a year. She got a smack on the hand, and the LA Times actually published an article that said generally someone who had caused such an accident and involuntary manslaughter is what she was charged with, that they would normally get 11 years, but how can you send a mother of four away for that long? And I, of course, was like, hello, I'm sentenced and my family is sentenced to life. What do you mean? And how are you showing empathy for the person who did this? She chose to take the drugs. She chose to get in the car. My dad just wanted to get home. And having to figure out how to do all these things, I couldn't sleep. The dark was a scary place for me. I was having nightmares that were horrific. Um, when I went back to work, and I don't remember how long later it was, my boss was kind enough to set up an office in a separate place where I was by myself. And she just said, just do what you can and just know that we're here. And I told her before I came back, please don't let everybody come welcome me back, because the seeing people and them crying, because my whole community knew, of course, it was all over the place and everybody knew my family. I always felt like I was comforting everyone else, and it was just too much. I couldn't handle it. And so they had me in this little side office, and one of the gentlemen who was head of sales had called me into his office, and he was kind of a mentor to me. And so I did go to see him, and he shut his office door and he proceeded to tell me that he and his wife had lost a child, and that their child had drowned when he was 4, and how difficult it was on the family, and that one of the things that have helped his family get through and has helped his marriage was this counselor, a trauma counselor. And he said, he pushed her card across the desk to me. And he said, I'm not telling you you need to go. I just wanted to share, in case you decide you want to go, that I recommend her. And I took the card, and I knew I needed something, because I felt like I don't have God because I'm mad at him. And nobody in the world understands me. Nobody knows what I'm going through. And I ended up going immediately. And I ended up actually not really liking her, but I went to someone else. And I didn't like her because I felt like, you can't relate to me. Did you lose your father when you were a teenager? Did he blow up in a car? How are you relating to me? Like, I was in that nasty space where you don't understand me. I'm not going to talk to you. I ended up going to a counselor who tragically lost her father when she was a teenager. And I believe it was by electrocution, that he worked with on telephone poles. And so I was like, oh my gosh, somebody who actually gets me. Now, I know now all of these things that lined up were God's doing. I needed her in my life so that I could figure out how to mourn, because nobody teaches us that. Um, and even though my family, it was my mom, my brother, and I, we're 3 people that went through the exact same thing, we mourn wildly different. Um, and being able to accept those things, and where I got stuck was, I was so angry and I didn't know how to be angry. What do I do? And it was things like, take your pillow and beat your bed. And when I did that, I'm telling you, I tore my room apart when I did that. But it's a relief to just be able to, because once I started going, man, I tore my room up, and then I sat on the floor and just sobbed, because you've got to release all of those things and the pain. But I still was having that struggle of, God, I can't forgive you. I'm so mad, because you could never do this to someone. and this woman wasn't punished who caused the accident, the 5-year court case with the car manufacturer and having to go to depositions and answer questions that no child should ever be asked about their parent, knowing that they're just trying to put a price tag on him. And how do I settle that? And how is my life ever going to be okay? Because it felt like you sit on the sidelines, and I would watch people laugh and go on in the world and be like, how is it that they can keep moving? And I just want everything to stop. And it hurt to watch people like, don't you know that my dad's dead? Like, don't you know that? And why don't you care? But it wasn't about everybody else. It was about me and trying to find that piece of forgiveness, because forgiveness is part of the cycle. And one of the greatest lessons I learned from this counselor was, the grief cycle, how we go through anger, denial, all the things that we start here. And when we go through it, we come out above it, that's called growth. And if we get stuck in it, we continue to spiral in that space. And all I knew is like, I don't care what I have to do. I don't want to live in this space because I hate it here. It sucks. It's not even just painful. I felt numb to so many things, but so disconnected just from the world. But there was something about having the third party counselor tell me that everything you're feeling is fine. It's okay of what you're feeling. Because I was thinking I had awful thoughts. I didn't want to go on living because it was too painful to live. It would take me out of here because I just want it to stop. But that all of those things that I was thinking were okay, because nobody talks about those things. Well, what do you mean you want to kill yourself after something, or you want to leave the planet, or I felt hatred towards the woman. I never felt hate in my life. And I felt it like I was seething with anger towards her. And more so because she had zero remorse. In the courtroom, she never shed a tear until the judge smacked her on the hand and said, "You're getting 9 months." And then she cried. And I thought, you had victims stand up and talk about how you caused their life to change dramatically, and never shed a tear when people were crying. I couldn't even speak to read my statement because I was so hysterical, and never a tear. But that's her journey. I'm telling you, it took me a long time with counseling, and there were things many years later, and where this all came up, Jason, was in this thing that you shared on the promo of me, which was 8 years ago. My dad was killed over 30 years ago. And his best friend was like a father figure to me. He passed about 8 years ago. He was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and it devastated me. And to the point where I couldn't speak of it to anyone. I mean, I would start sobbing uncontrollably. And I went to a counselor and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. And then to fast forward through it, we went through several different exercises. And one of them was, when you think about death, which I always associate it to my father, well, what's the first word that comes to mind? And before she was almost finished saying it, I said the word abandonment. And then I was mad because I was like, abandonment? That's stupid. He didn't choose to leave me. She goes, well, do you know what the real definition of abandonment is? I was like, well, yeah, it has something to do with, completely or permanently leaving. She said, yeah, but where in there does it say anything about that they made that choice? Huh, interesting. And I'm like, so this whole time, because there were a few deaths over my life that knocked me off of my feet, that didn't match. You know what I mean? It was too much. And I didn't understand why until that moment. And I was like, oh my God, here's something that's still unhealed this many years later. But the importance about that is allowing ourselves grace and knowing that I believe this and I say this a lot is just because we go get treatment for something doesn't mean we're finished. It's not like, oh, I went, I feel better, I'm done, I'm good. And that it's all going to be honky dory the rest of our life. That things will come up, but being aware of them and then again, allowing ourselves grace to be like, huh, interesting, and curious about it. Interesting that that hung out for that long and I didn't see it because we mourn or grieve whatever it is. If it's a death, a loss of a job, a loss of a marriage, we can only handle what we can handle at the time. I couldn't handle all the things that I was feeling with my dad because it was overwhelming. You can only deal little by little by little. And as you heal, then more things will come to heal. Um, and I say a lot too, if growth were easy, we'd all be doing it. And I agree with what everyone has said. Some of the greatest lessons I've ever made in life were from the hardest things that I've gone through. And that was definitely one of them. And how it makes me look at life because my father was he was a big goofball. Like he's somebody everybody liked. He was just that guy. Um, and I'm like, who am I to live a moment more feeling anger, all these things? Because the preciousness of life is we never know when we're not going to pull into that driveway. We never know. And a big thing that I take away, and I started then, and I think I always did with my family. I never went to bed a night in my life without being told I was loved, even when I was not probably lovable. Um, is I never hang up a phone call with any of my friends, my loved ones, without saying I love you, just because I never know if that's going to be the last words they'll ever hear from me or that I'll ever say. And I wanted to be sure of that because those were the last words. Thank God I said to my dad because that meant something to me. At least he knows. And one last thing I want to say is when his best friend was diagnosed and I discovered that I was still holding on to some things, is we were sitting there and she said, you know, where is he, where's your uncle right now? I said, well, technically he's in Dallas. She said, can you see him? I said, no. She said, but you know he's there, right? Yeah. Yeah, I know he's there. So what's going to be the difference when he's no longer physically here? Huh, you're right. Because my dad is with me every single day. I know that. And I believe that we carry those things. And my dad has been there through some of the hardest things in my life. I will still talk to him or ask him because I know what he would say. Um, and just living in the moments of, God, you didn't have the opportunity to do this. I'm going to. He would have loved to have jumped out of a plane. My mom's not thrilled that I did it, but I did. Um, but remembering how precious it is and understanding too, God didn't do anything to me. That just so happened to be my dad's journey. And I have people to this day that'll still say, I can never imagine going through what you went through. I would never be able to do it. I say, yeah, you would though, because you just haven't been called to task. And my mom always told me that God never gives us more than we can handle. And I say, you know what? I really wish he didn't think so highly of me sometimes. Um, but everything that we go through is a gift. And I didn't get to this part of losing my father and that whole experience to be something that created growth and beauty in my life and for me to see things in such a different way overnight. It was a journey of its own to get where I am. And it was rough. And allowing ourselves again that grace to go through the process because boy, it's hard work. And surrounding yourself with people who are there to support you and pick you up when you need to fall because guess what, we all fall on our face sometimes and we need one another. And I feel that's another thing that comes from me is seeing each person not just from a curiosity standpoint but from empathy. I don't know what everybody else's path has been. we never know what's behind the smile. You know, people, and I've had this happen a lot when I do other speaking on other topics and be like, I can't believe that you went through that. Well, that's because I'm not the person I was then. I'm a totally different human now because I've grown through the experience. Um, so I guess all that being said is my takeaway is yes, growth is painful, but boy, it is so worth it. And God is great, even when we don't believe that He is. And it's okay to be mad at Him every once in a while.